Hello and welcome to Government with Dr. Turner. Today we're going to talk about voting and how it fits into the overall picture of political participation. The defining characteristic of democracy is citizen participation. Democracy means rule by the people. People should be a part of the process. There are several ways to participate in the political process. Some types of participation are considered conventional. These include voting, working on campaigns, joining special interest groups, getting involved in local campaigns, and participating virtually online. Unconventional participation, sometimes called activism, includes joining protests or social movements. Voting is the most basic way to participate in democracy. Literally, voting is the least you can do. Even though it is simple and doesn't require a large time commitment, voting remains one of the most important forms of political activity. It gives ordinary citizens the most equal chance to participate in politics. But voting alone doesn't provide much information. A vote for or against doesn't explain why people support or oppose an issue. Imagine how little communication would take place in a relationship if you were limited to saying only yes or no. The political history of the United States is also a history of expanding suffrage over time. The term suffrage refers to the right to vote. It's from the Latin word suffragium, which means vote. After the nation was founded, only males who owned property were eligible to vote. Today, suffrage is available for all American citizens over the age of 18. Voting rules are made by states. In principle, states determine the voting requirements. In reality, constitutional amendments, federal statutes, and federal court decisions have limited the state's discretion over voting rights because of civil rights conflicts. Property requirements, an early barrier to voting, were generally removed in the 1820s. However, property requirements remained in use by some states in the form of the poll tax. After the Civil War, freed slaves were given the right to vote. Some states fought this change by limiting suffrage. The southern states created the Jim Crow racial segregation system. They placed multiple barriers that were effective in blocking political participation by people of color. In the 1960s, the Civil Rights Movement demanded the restoration of African American voting rights. This was accomplished by the Voting Rights Act of 1965. But in Shelby County v. Holder, 2013, the Supreme Court invalidated part of the Voting Rights Act. After this ruling, states began to put in place new voting laws that appear to negatively impact the ability of persons of color to vote. Women gained the right to vote early in the 20th century. Women won the right to vote in 1920 with the adoption of the 19th Amendment. The most recent voting rights expansion took place in 1971 during the Vietnam War with the 26th Amendment, which lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. Government leadership hoped dropping the legal voting age to 18 would lead to a decline in disruptive student protests during the war. The term turnout describes the number of people that actually vote. Turnout in the United States is very low. Compared with Western Europe, the United States has a lower turnout in elections. In the 21st century, voting rates in the United States have remained lower than in nearly every other democracy. The primary impact of state voter registration laws has been to decrease turnout. Why are some people more likely to vote than others? Individual characteristics partly explain participation levels. A consistent finding of political science research into voting trends is that highly educated voters are far more likely to participate in elections than less educated voters. Compared with U.S. citizens of higher incomes, those of lower incomes are much less likely to vote in elections. Those who are less likely to vote tend to be poor rather than wealthy. Other factors playing a role in participation include ethnicity, race, and age. Current survey research indicates that voter turnout increases with age. The political environment also affects the likelihood of voting. Political participation over time is determined by more than just the characteristics of individuals. The political environment plays an important role in whether or not people have resources, feel engaged, or are recruited to participate in politics. Citizens' feelings of effectiveness in political affairs is called political efficacy. People are unlikely to vote if they believe their vote won't make a difference. Some voters feel alienated by the political system as if they have been pushed outside of the process. Some voters suffer from apathy, a general lack of interest in politics. On the other hand, regular voters typically have a strong sense of civic duty. Let's review. The primary impact of state voter registration laws has been to decrease turnout. In Shelby County v. Holder 2013, the Supreme Court invalidated part of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Those who are less likely to vote tend to be poor rather than wealthy. Current survey research indicates that voter turnout increases with age. Citizens' feelings of effectiveness in political affairs is called political efficacy.